Hi, it's Dwyer. Always 1776.com, a free site. Also, money 1776.com, a free site. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Let me also plug dwyercrime.blog. I hope you give it a look. Now, let's talk about a problem prosecutors have from time to time, even the very best. And I consider the prosecutor in this Melanie McGuire case to have been excellent. But the problem they have is they have, in the United States, an incredibly high burden of proof. They have to prove you guilty of the crime with proof beyond a reasonable doubt. In other words, they have to come across like they know what happened. And sometimes they feel in their guts that they know the defendant did the crime, but there's a hole in the case. And prosecutors will try to cover up that hole. Right now, I believe the criminal justice system works about as good as it can. I do believe that juries play ball with prosecutors who are covering up a big hole in a case where there is an obviously guilty defendant. Right? I believe that happens. Folks, I believe that happened in this Melanie McGuire case. Now, I have an earlier video up where I make the argument that Melanie did the crime, that Melanie is guilty. But what I want is for people to actually look at this case, see the whole, right? Let's bring a new dynamic to true crime. Let's openly talk about what the prosecutor themselves can't mention. Right? The clear hole in the case that, quite frankly, is there and is worth discussing. First, let's go over the facts, just so people have the background. Melanie McGuire, a mother, is about to close on her first home they had been renting with her husband, Bill McGuire. Right? Bill wanted to move to Virginia Beach. The couple was living in New Jersey. Melanie convinced Bill to buy a home in New Jersey, closer to where their rented townhouse was. Now, at the time all of this was going on, Melanie was having an affair. She was a nurse. Her affair was with the doctor at work. Well, on the night in question, where Melanie is about to close on a home with her husband, Bill, they have an argument. According to Melanie, Bill left. He stormed out. He goes missing for days. Now, what I want people to think about is that their parents, right? I'm a divorce attorney. I can tell you when one parent storms out, particularly when there is financial responsibility, right? There's a home closing taking place. I can tell you that that's when I get a lot of calls. Parents with kids are always concerned about child support when one parent storms off. Melanie doesn't report it to the cops. Right? Melanie doesn't file a missing persons report when hubby doesn't show up for days. Right? Weeks go by. About a month. Right? Melanie doesn't follow up, even though they have kids. Even though They had an argument, and hubby stormed out of the house. Now, let me just say, hubby's body is found floating in 3 pieces of luggage in a body of water in another state. Right? It's important to understand that Bill's body is not found in New Jersey. Right? The water where Bill's body is found is outside of New Jersey, in another state. Bill, it turns out, has been shot. Now, it's devastating for Melanie in terms of losing her husband, losing the father of her children. But when the police turned their eyes on her, the fact that Bill was found in another state, the fact that Bill was shot, should have been great for Melanie. Right? Understand, Melanie had filed for a restraining order while Bill was missing. She was asked by the judge at the hearing whether or not she had a gun, access to a gun. She said no. Right, folks? It's on a recording. She said no. So, the fact that Bill's found far away from where Melanie and Bill live should have been great for her. Right? The easiest defense is to tell the cops, gee, I wasn't there. His body was found someplace outside the state. I have no idea what happened outside the state. Also, he was shot. I wasn't the shooter. In fact, I don't have a gun. Right? Well, understand the problem. She bought a gun. She bought it close to when Bill goes missing. She had it when she sought the TRO and told the judge that she didn't have a gun. Her argument is that she bought the gun for Bill. Right? But just understand, I believe the gun's bought 2 days before Bill goes missing. When the judge at a judicial proceeding asks about a gun, it seems to me that that's the moment for you to mention the gun. Either way, right? Number one, the fact that you bought the gun. Number two, the fact that the guy you're seeking the TRO against is armed and dangerous. The gun is relevant. She knew of the gun because she's the one who bought the gun. She told the judge that she didn't have a gun. Right? That Bill didn't have a gun. She lied in court. We don't have to speculate about whether Melanie McGuire is capable of lying in court, because we have the recording of the court proceeding, and she lied at the TRO hearing about the gun. Let's go one step further. The gun is a certain type that fires certain bullets. Just understand that the bullets found in Bill's body are consistent with the type of gun she bought. Now again, the fact that a gun was used, an innocent defendant would feel a bit relieved if that defendant didn't have a gun, never bought a gun. Right here, that's not the case. But understand, even if she bought a gun, there's so many different types of guns. Right? Law enforcement knows what type she bought because they tracked down the person who sold it to her, the gun dealer. Right? He was surprised he had never sold a gun before to a nurse. Well, just understand how, if you believe she's innocent, unlucky Melanie is. Right? The gun she bought, oh, guess what? It just happens to fire the kind of bullets that were found in Bill's body. Moreover, the remains floating in another state, again, that should be good news. You're in New Jersey. The body's found in the Chesapeake Bay, miles away. Right? Your argument, the best argument would be, gee, I've been close to home. Of course, Melanie can't make that argument because she was on the road that leads to Chesapeake Bay. She supposedly had to travel out of state to buy some furniture. Of course, hubby's body is found floating in something. It's suitcases. And of course, the suitcases are their suitcases. His and hers. Right? Inside the suitcases are plastic bags. And of course, the plastic bags are consistent with their plastic bags. Understand, shortly after Bill goes missing, Melanie gives his clothes to a relative. Right? She puts the clothes in plastic bags. Now, folks, I have blue plastic bags right now. Sometimes I have green plastic bags. I also have white plastic bags. Plastic bags come in different colors. The plastic bags Bill was found in, of course, are the same color as the plastic bags found in Melanie's home. Right? The plastic bags Bill was found in are the same type plastic bags that the couple used. Right? An expert even made the argument at trial that they were from batches that were manufactured close together. Now, the murder victim's car was found in Atlantic City. Right? Melanie told law enforcement that hubby had a gambling problem and had likely left her to go to Atlantic City. Well, then, of course, let me stop here and say the fact that the victim's car is found in Atlantic City should have been good news. It's the murder victim who has the gambling problem, not Nurse Melanie. You thought that should be part of an airtight alibi. Right? You thought Melanie's attorney would be able to say, hey, my client wasn't in Atlantic City. No one saw my client in Atlantic City. Why would my client with young kids take the time to travel all the way to Atlantic City? Of course, Melanie can't make that argument because the highway pass on her car shows that it drove to Atlantic City. She ultimately admitted going to Atlantic City, looking for Bill's car, finding Bill's car, and moving Bill's car to spite him. Right? The idea is that Bill, who is supposed to be so dangerous, that she sought a restraining order against him. The idea is that, let's say Bill's in the Flamingo, she's angry, she wants to be in close enough proximity to Bill to actually move his car. Right? Even though she feels that she needs a restraining order. Let me say I operate Gambler's Advisory. It's a website that talks about betting, gambling. Let me tell you one of the problems, and gamblers know this is true, that gamblers have in places like Atlantic City, Vegas. Right, there are some days where you have to leave early. In other words, you're in the casino, you double down on some bets, they work against you, you're running low on money, you hit your quota on how much you have budgeted to lose, and you say, that's it. I'm going to get up and I'm going to leave. Right? The cards aren't working for me tonight. Right? You might be in the sports book. You might have a lot of money on the Yankees. Let's say the Yankees are playing the Red Sox. And those Red Sox open up a 6-7 run lead. This is your big bet. You might think to yourself, you know what? I don't want to be around here for the rest of this game. It's done. I'm leaving. Right? If you've been to Atlantic City enough times or Las Vegas enough times, you'll see people leaving. Sometimes earlier than it looks like they wanted to leave. Right? Your chips start running out. You say, hey, that's it. I'm not going to make another withdrawal. I've lost my quota for tonight. It's early in the night. I'm going to leave. I personally find Melanie's story to be completely phony here. Right? I'm going to go to Atlantic City. Hubby, leaves home unexpectedly. When we have a real estate transaction we need to close, he goes to Atlantic City. I follow him down there. I find his vehicle. Folks, it sounds like hubby went to Atlantic City in a rage. I don't know when he's going to return to his car. Right? I see his car. I don't know if it's a hot night. Sometimes, you're in a casino, you're making money. You say, hey, I'm not going to leave. They're going to have to pull me out of here. I'm on a winning streak. I'm going to ride this. Right? Those nights you might stay longer than other nights where, dealers getting blackjack repeatedly. You're thinking, gee, this is a lucky guy. I can't beat him tonight. I'm going to leave early. Right? She claims to have known when Bill, or at least had an expectation that she would have enough time to move his car. Think about how ridiculous it is. She's supposed to have driven her car down there. Then she's moving his car. If he called the police and she's busted around the car, folks, that would not have been a laughing matter. Well, just understand that the chloral hydrate prescription form found in the vehicle was written on Melanie's lover's prescription pad. Just understand that that substance, which knocks out people, was picked up near Melanie's kid's school. Just understand, Melanie puts herself in the driver's seat of Bill's car. Human sawdust was found on the driver's side of the victim's vehicle that Melanie admits driving. In other words, whoever was in that driver's seat, may have been Melanie, may have been somebody else. Right? Understand, you're dealing with two vehicles, the victim's and Melanie's vehicle. Seems like she had a helper with her. Go down to Atlantic City, doesn't it? Well, whoever was in the driver's seat of Bill's car left behind human debris in a case where we know Bill's body, which was discovered in luggage bags, was cut up. Right? Now here's the mystery. If Bill's cut up in such a way that human sawdust is found in his car, Where was Bill killed? Because law enforcement took apart where Melanie and Bill were staying, and they didn't uncover any evidence that a body was dismembered there. Right? No evidence whatsoever. Right? We know human sawdust existed. Where's the human sawdust? At Melanie's home. So let me make a few points here. And I want people to think about this. You know, we don't know the timeline. Bill is missing for days, plural, before Melanie tells anyone that he's missing. She had ample time to structure this crime. Right? Let me go one step further. Melanie and Bill didn't have a pet. But Bill's body is found in their luggage bags, in their luggage, right? The trash bags are in their luggage, floating in the Chesapeake Bay. And in those luggage containers is animal hair, right? Let's bluntly say here what the prosecutor couldn't say at trial. Melanie had a friend who had a pet who helped her cut up Bill's body. I believe Bill's drugged. Melanie's a nurse. There's a chloride hydrate prescription. I believe Bill's drugged, then Bill's taken someplace. Now let's figure out who Melanie is. There was a guy in nursing school who had a crush on Melanie. So Melanie, who had not contacted him for some length of time after nursing school, suddenly starts contacting him months before Bill goes missing. And of course, what does she contact this guy to talk about? How her marriage is not working out. How her husband is bad news. How she wants to move on from her husband. Now this guy ended up working with law enforcement. Right? Law enforcement taped some of his calls with Melanie. Right? He agreed to the taping. It's clear he didn't know basic facts, like the fact that Melanie, right before hubby goes missing, bought a gun. Right? So this guy didn't play ball with her in terms of assisting her on hurting her husband. But someone did. Right? Bill, to me, is not dismembered where he lived. His body is taken someplace the cops don't know about. Right? There's someone out there who helped Melanie dismember her husband. The cops weren't able to locate that person. The cops would have had a harder time at trial if their narrative for the case had Bill being taken to a location of which they have no knowledge and then being dismembered there. Right? Melanie made the big mistake of putting herself in Atlantic City. I guess she had to. Once her highway pass showed that she went to Atlantic City. Right? One of the problems I have with Melanie is that her version leaks out. It's not a version front and center. No, it's, oh, I was having an affair. It's oh, yeah, I went to Atlantic City. It's yeah, I did travel, outside the state to buy furniture. I did buy a gun, but that's because my husband wanted a gun and he had something in his background, some minor felony, that prevented him from buying a gun. Oh, and by the way, my husband was a gambler who hung around with unsavory people. Maybe that part of him is the part that got him killed. Right? So the Melanie story is one that shows a lack of preparation. It shows someone who's not completely honest up front. Right? It shows someone withholding facts until they have to disclose them. Right? Oh, my highway pass in my car shows that I traveled to Atlantic City. Yeah, that night I did. Right? So understand, where Bill was killed had human sawdust. In other words, it was messy, not pristine. Right? The cops don't know where Bill was killed. More importantly, the cops don't know who helped Melanie. The prosecutor, who was brilliant, openly talked about how someone may have helped Melanie. Again, the Atlantic City trip, 2 cars are involved. Right? Melanie, who has kids, somehow makes it to Atlantic City and is able to move Bill's car, go back to her car. Or was there someone else who was in Melanie's car when Melanie was in Bill's car? Right? We need to figure out those things. They didn't at the time of trial. But the jury figured out that Melanie was a serial liar. That parts of her story didn't make sense. That there were too many moments, like the moment where the judge at the restraining order hearing asks her if there's anyone in her circle who has a gun. And she says, not to her knowledge, when she had just bought a gun that she claims her husband wanted, the guy she's seeking the temporary restraining order against. Right, so folks, I feel Melanie McGuire did the murder, or at least is involved in the murder. Right? Her luggage was used. Her plastic bags were used. Right? She bought a gun. She is on the road that leads to Chesapeake Bay. She is in Bill's car in Atlantic City. In fact, she's the one who told the cops to look at Atlantic City. Right? She's trying to flesh out a narrative. But the fact that none of the evidence that shows that Bill was dismembered was found at the townhouse that Melanie shared with Bill tells you that there's a part of the case that the prosecution didn't know about. They can't openly discuss it with you because it might open up the door for reasonable doubt. Right? Melanie filed appeals. The appeals were denied based on the prosecution story that Bill was dismembered where they lived. But they have no evidence to support that claim. Right? They, looked in walls. They were looking for blood. No doubt they had forensic tools like luminol. Keep in mind, Bill's legs are found in one piece of luggage. His head's found in another piece of luggage. Right? Bill's cut up. That would have been difficult to do for a layperson. Melanie, who has given ABC some interviews and looks at the camera and doesn't blink when she tells her story. Let's just say I don't trust her, and I believe she's withholding key parts. Right? I believe she was confident. She's calm at trial. I believe she was confident that she would be acquitted, in part because she had Joe Tacopina, Alex Rodriguez's former attorney. He's since represented Donald Trump. She had a high-powered attorney on her legal team, but also in part because she knew privately that there were parts of the case that the prosecution did not know about, including her accomplice and the location where Bill's body was dismembered. Right? The jury wasn't going to lose sleep over that. I believe in situations like this, jurors are smarter than you think. I think they understand that Bill might not have been killed at home, but they know that Bill was killed under the direction of the defendant, and that the defendant was the impetus for Bill getting killed. Right? They don't want someone like that walking the streets. She, of course, got convicted. She's not going to be eligible for parole until she's 101. But let's recognize this case is just one of many high-profile cases with factual holes in them. Right? The prosecutor is very articulate. They have to say that Bill was killed at home, because they just don't know where he was actually killed. So, of course, the party line is that he was killed and dismembered at home, and that Melanie did a spectacular job cleaning up the DNA evidence. You and I know that in this day and age of forensic evidence, where, investigators have many tools, can spray luminol, can find where blood was, can find, traces of blood on the side of a, faucet. You and I know the prosecutors realize he wasn't killed at home. He was killed someplace else. But it doesn't mean that she is not guilty. Those are my thoughts. Let me hear yours in the comments section of this YouTube video. Thanks for stopping by.